Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Want to go ahead and get to a little bit of college football news. As on Monday, we put a bow on a story that was very interesting over the last couple days, and it was what the heck was going to happen at UCLA. Now, obviously, Friday, the head coaching job opens up. As I explained on Monday's show, I wasn't really that surprised. Beyond just Chip Kelly interviewing for NFL head coaching job or NFL assistant coordinator or NFL coordinator jobs, I was told, look, he's best friends with Ryan Day. This is something that he would consider. He takes the job on Friday. The question becomes, well, who the heck is next? Well, on Monday morning, we got the answer, and it was in some degrees a surprise hire, but in some degrees not. As former UCLA legend, Deshaun Foster, who most recently was the running backs coach for UCLA last year, played in the NFL, has been a coach in college football for about the last decade, including about the last 6-7 years at UCLA, had actually left for a few weeks to be the Las Vegas Raiders running backs coach. Well, he was hired away from the Raiders and becomes the head coach at UCLA. A lot of people ask me, Torres, what do you think? Torres, do you like it? And I'm here to say this. Given the circumstances, given the timing on the calendar, this was actually about as well as UCLA probably could have done. And there's a number of reasons I don't hate the hire. First reason I don't hate the hire, the calendar matters and context matters, right? Context matters in any conversation in sports. Like, look at the Super Bowl. What have we been talking about all day with the Super Bowl? Should Kyle Shanahan have taken the ball first in overtime? Well, the context there is like, well, it's one thing to take the ball first. It's another thing to take the ball first when no matter what happens, you have to give the ball back to Patrick Mahomes. That's where the context comes into play in the Super Bowl or in any conversation. And the context here that matters is you're not making a hire when everybody else is making a hire in December. You're making a hire in mid to late February, and the pool of candidates just isn't going to be there. By the way, that's not just a UCLA thing. Michigan just won a national championship. And even they were like, you know what? Rather than going outside the family, rather than worrying about all these kids entering the portal, let's keep it in-house. Let's keep as much of this thing together as possible. And so for UCLA, yes, if this opened in November, I do think that Jonathan Smith, who was the Oregon State coach, is now at Michigan State, would have been interested. If this had opened in November, I do think that Jedd Fisch, who was the Arizona coach, who is now at Washington, would have been interested. But it ain't November. It ain't December. It ain't even January. It's February 12th as I'm recording here. There's just not a lot of candidates available. And so you get this guy. I think more importantly, what he does is he keeps the staff together. He keeps the roster together. And for all Chip Kelly's faults, all Chip Kelly's blame, 9 wins in the 2022 season, 8 wins in 2023. Now, you can argue that should be better. Chip Kelly's paid this, that, the other thing, whatever. You're still talking about a program that had 17 wins over the last 2 years. And why this hire sort of, I don't want to say had to be Deshaun Foster, but at the same time, what I don't think a lot of people realize, there's parts that are obvious and parts that aren't. One, by hiring this guy, I think most of the roster stays together. Now, you're still going to lose guys to the portal, whatever. But at the same time, go watch the reaction video when Martin Jarman, the AD, brings him in as the head coach. It immediately, the players love him. The players are excited to play for him. So you're going to keep together a roster that won 17 games. And I think what's also important, you're going to keep that staff together. Now, you're not going to keep everybody, but at the same time, that matters, and I'll tell you why. Most of the staff is actually, from my understanding, on multi-year contracts. So it was going to be hard to get rid of most of them anyway. And so I'm not saying you hire a coach to keep the DBs coach happy or the safeties coach happy or the O-line coach happy. But at the same time, the staff at least knows what they're getting from him, knows what to expect. And I do think you keep the staff together, you keep the team together. That's not the worst thing going into a season where you're entering the Big Ten. If you were coming off an 11-1 season and you're playing in the Pac-12, that's one thing. But you got to play next year. You got to play, I want to say, Michigan. You got a loaded schedule. This isn't the time to bring in somebody from the outside who doesn't know the team, doesn't know the players, doesn't know the staff. Players leave. this kind of makes sense. What I would also say is that by all accounts, the things that made UCLA, the things that Chip Kelly struggled with, I think this guy's going to address them in the press conference, or not the press conference. He has that on Tuesday in the statement. Like we understand that he understands the importance of recruiting and NIL. And that's something that Chip Kelly probably understands the importance of, but he just didn't care enough to actually do anything about it. Chip Kelly did not want to recruit. Well, guess what? This guy is a recruiter, one of the top high school coaches in California from St. John Bosco, one of the elite high school factories in the state, frankly, one of the best high school programs in the country. He actually put out a statement and was like, I love this hire. This guy's great. He's been around my program. I love working with him. He recruits the right way. So you have a guy that is going to at least be willing to recruit. And if a guy's willing to recruit, there is plenty of talent to win at a really high level at UCLA. Listen, the 5 stars, the elite players, this is still an NIL world. And I don't know if an Alabama, a Georgia, an Ohio State, a whoever comes into SoCal and wants one of your players. I don't know that UCLA has the money to compete with that for high school players, but there are enough players to win 8, 9, maybe even 10 games. Think about all the great teams on the West Coast. Washington just played for a title. How many California kids they have? Utah, consistently awesome. How many California kids they have? So the players are here to compete. You just got to be willing to go out and try to get them, which Chip Kelly didn't. I think the other thing, NIL and money coming into the program. Let me say this about UCLA. I do live in LA, and I do think there's a little bit of a misperception about how much money is kind of around the program. Now, UCLA doesn't have great NIL right now. And historically, it is not a place where boosters have shelled out just a ton of money for the sake of spending a ton of money. We talked about this last week. It's a place that historically, really, frankly, kind of the attitude has been, we're UCLA. Coaches should want to come here on the cheap. Assistant coaches should want to come here on the cheap. We're UCLA, fight, fight, fight. And I do think that attitude's changed a little bit last couple of years. One, new practice facility in football, as good as any in America, just opened up about 4 or 5 years ago. New basketball facility just opened up. So the money is there. And the money is there in LA. You just have to go out and work for it. These boosters aren't just going to go ahead and write you a check for X amount of dollars and say, go do with it what you want. I trust you. There's a lot of schools in the SEC that are like that. Schools in the Big Ten that are like that. UCLA is not like that. But it doesn't mean that there's not money here. You just have to explain to boosters what it's for, why it's needed, and why, if you want your team to compete for championships, this is what you have to do. Now, you got to go out and win once you get the money. But I think there's more money in LA at UCLA than people probably give it credit for. Lastly, and I do think this is important, this is going to sound bad, but I do think with a guy like this, we'll figure out the contract details over the next couple of days. But my guess is if things go sideways, I would assume this is a contract that will be pretty easy to get out of if things don't work out, okay? Because at the end of the day, listen, you could have gone out and spent tens of millions of dollars on a retread or somebody that's past his prime. You weren't getting the elite of the elite candidates. But with a candidate like this, I think it's kind of the same with Sharon Moore at Michigan. You get him a little bit on the cheap. You know that this is their best chance at a head coaching opportunity, especially at a place that they want to be. I'm not saying you root against him, but ultimately, if it doesn't work out, my guess is he probably will be one of the less highly paid head coaches in the Big Ten. And I don't think UCLA is rooting against him. I mean, you can tell just from the introduction to the team. Martin Jarmond clearly has a great relationship with him. The players clearly have a great relationship with him. I'm not saying people are rooting for him to fail. But if it doesn't work out, this ain't going to be a Jimbo Fisher $76 million buyout that you got to pay. I'm guessing it's not even like a Jim Moore. Remember, Jim Moore, when he got fired at UCLA, that was like an $18, $19 million buyout. So listen, not rooting for the guy to fail. Nobody at UCLA is. But I think given the circumstances, this could have gone in a much, much, much worse way. You get a guy that wants to be there. You get a guy that the staff likes. You get a guy that the players like. And now you head into the Big Ten, and you got to win some games.